Enchantment bowls emerged as magical instruments used in the spiritual practices of ancient Mesopotamia. They were created around the 6th to 8th centuries AD, a time when supernatural beliefs played a crucial role in people's lives. Most of the bowls found were made from clay, an accessible and durable material, which helped popularize their use among common households. These protective objects were especially sought after by communities who believed demons had a direct influence on everyday life. The bowls carried the promise of warding off evil energies and bringing security to the home. The shape of these bowls closely resembles modern cereal bowls, making them easy to store discreetly within homes. The surface of the bowl was carefully prepared to receive magical inscriptions meant to counter misfortune and repel demons. This work was often carried out by ritual specialists who inscribed protective formulas in spirals along the bowl. These inscriptions were mostly written in Aramaic or other local languages, so that anyone who needed them could understand the enchantments. The inscribed words symbolized the strength of the spiritual protection sought by the family. The symbolism of the enchantment bowls went beyond mere superstition. It was a ritual that united people around the belief in divine protection against malevolent forces. The fear of demons and spirits was widespread, and Mesopotamian society invested in practices to help manage these malign influences. Demons were seen as entities that could interfere with health, relationships, and even family well-being. Thus, the bowls became a visible spiritual barrier, signifying the presence of protection and safeguarding. Each home with an enchantment bowl now possessed an invisible defense. The process of creating the bowls was also revered, and many believed that the writing ritual itself had inherent power to seal away evil. Each inscribed word held a specific meaning, and the enchantments followed formulas consecrated by specialists. Some of these formulas were passed down through generations, and many practitioners performed acts of devotion as they wrote the protective words. This meticulous and devout care strengthened the mystical power of the bowls, making them one of the few accessible forms of defense against demons for many families. Within the bowls, Mesopotamian tradition preserved symbols and formulas that often referenced well-known myths and figures. The belief that the bowl acted as a prison for a malevolent spirit influenced its specific structure, like the spiral inscriptions. In the center of the bowls, it was common to find an image depicting an imprisoned demon, often in chains, suggesting it was under control. This symbol helped strengthen the perception that the evil force was confined and could not harm the household. The demon, shown in a position of submission, reinforced the sense of safety for those who owned the bowl. Beyond ordinary homes, enchantment bowls were used in temples and sacred places to bolster the community's spiritual security. Religious figures and priests encouraged their use, and they became an almost universal practice for families seeking peace and protection. In times of hardship and uncertainty, the bowls offered emotional and spiritual support, empowering people against the fear of the unseen. Thus, these objects encapsulated a form of practical, accessible spirituality, allowing people to maintain a sense of safety amidst life's mysteries and uncertainties. Enchantment bowls were carefully designed to serve both as protective objects and symbols of spiritual power. The spiral inscription began at the rim and wound toward the center as a symbolic form of imprisoning evil. This spiral style was no arbitrary choice. It was believed to help channel the enchantment's energies, drawing the demon spirit toward the center. This organization was essential to ensure that the bowl acted as an effective barrier against evil forces. Each word and each curve, therefore, had ritualistic purpose. The words inscribed on the bowl were often protective enchantments, invocations of divine figures, and curses against the imprisoned spirit. These texts did not follow a single pattern but could vary depending on the nature of the threat and the purpose of the ritual. Many bowls included the names of local gods or references to sacred figures to enhance the protection's potency. This use of powerful language was common in Mesopotamia, where written words held sacred power. Families trusted in the efficacy of these formulas to defend against unseen attacks. In the center of the bowl, it was common to find illustrations of demons bound or in positions of submission. These images often showed figures with chains or bound limbs, reinforcing the idea of containing evil. Many of these figures had grotesque features, such as large heads and disproportionate bodies, heightening the visual effect of imprisonment. The depiction of demons in this style contributed to creating a clear image of control and security for those who used the bowl. This visual element also reinforced the symbolic power of the enchantments. Some scholars believe that the demon illustrations on the bowls served partly as a way to transform fear into something tangible and manageable. By giving the demon a specific form, people could imagine the evil being restrained. This approach made the threat more understandable and less abstract, allowing the population to better cope with their fears. It was as if the evil were materialized, making it easier to control and banish. This psychological strategy helped alleviate anxiety and increased confidence in the bowl's protective power. Enchantment bowls could also feature representations of protective figures, like animals or guardian deities, alongside the inscriptions. These additional elements strengthened the bowl's defensive power and created a network of visual and spiritual protection. These symbols varied according to culture and period, but all aimed to reinforce the goal of repelling evil. This composition strengthened the belief that divine protection was present, and that evil held no power against these guardian forces. Thus, the bowl became a true symbolic battlefield against evil. Enchantment bowls, therefore, were not merely vessels with magical inscriptions, but deeply meaningful artifacts that united culture, faith, and art. Each curve, word, and image worked together to create a powerful symbol of protection. The careful construction of these details reinforced the idea that evil was under control. In practice, these bowls became focal points of faith and hope, helping to dispel the shadows surrounding daily life in ancient Mesopotamia. Lilith is an enigmatic figure, shrouded in mystery with a long history in mythic tradition. She appears in medieval Jewish legends as Adam's first wife, preceding Eve, who refuses to submit to him. This myth portrays Lilith as an independent spirit who flees Eden to preserve her freedom, making her a symbol of rebellion. Over the centuries, this figure became associated with negative aspects, such as vengeance against children and pregnant women. This challenging story established her as a demonic presence in Jewish culture. The idea of Lilith as Adam's first wife does not appear in the Bible but in later Jewish texts, such as the Alphabet of Ben Sira. In this account, Lilith leaves Eden and becomes a threat to humanity, especially to newborns. By defying Adam, she gained fame as a spirit of independence and dark power. Her image came to be viewed with apprehension, but also admiration by those who saw her as a challenging figure. This conflict between submission and independence is key to understanding Lilith's complex myth. Lilith is also known for making a pact with angels sent by God, promising not to harm children who wore a protective amulet. This pact created the tradition of using amulets bearing Lilith's name, especially to protect infants. This custom reflects the belief in the power of sacred objects against evil and connects Lilith to divine and ritualistic power. Although she is seen as a threat, the pact shows a more ambiguous side to her character. This detail introduces an intriguing duality, wherein Lilith, though feared, can be repelled through protective rituals. In Jewish tradition, Lilith is often portrayed as a nocturnal and mysterious figure, associated with the moon and shadows. This connection with the night reinforces her image as an independent spirit who moves far from the daylight. Medieval Jewish culture viewed her as embodying the powers of hidden forces that roam the dark. This relationship with the unknown helped make her a fascinating, yet fearsome figure. The fear of the unknown, represented by Lilith, was a powerful force in culture and religion, where her name was avoided to prevent attracting her attention. Lilith's presence in medieval Jewish tradition inspired various rituals and amulets intended to protect against her influence. Amulets were commonly used to ward off her presence, and expulsion rituals were performed to protect homes and families. This tradition spread across various regions, showing the reach and persistence of belief in Lilith as a demonic force. These rituals symbolized the ongoing battle against evil and reflected the community's desire for safety and protection. Thus, Lilith became an essential character in popular Jewish spirituality. The figure of Lilith in medieval Jewish tradition represents the conflict between submission and independence, life and death, light and darkness. Her depictions range from a rebellious, independent spirit to a child-harming demon, illustrating the ambiguity of her character. For some, she was a symbol of danger and disorder. For others, a figure representing freedom and strength. Lilith, therefore, remained a haunting but profoundly significant presence in Jewish tradition, crossing eras and cultures with lasting impact. The name Lilith has a complex etymological origin, tracing back to ancient Mesopotamian languages. In Sumerian culture, the word Lu or Lilitu was used to describe spirits or winds, with Lilu designating male demons and Lilitu, female. These figures were seen as spirits roaming the night, bringing omens or disease. The name's origin suggests a connection with forces that transcend the physical world, linking it to mystery and the unknown. Thus, Lilith finds a place in a long tradition of supernatural beings in Mesopotamia. It is believed that the name Lilith may also have influences in the Akkadian and Babylonian languages, where similar terms indicated evil spirits. This linguistic root points to a tradition of male and female demons, which varied according to culture and historical context. These demons were not just figures of fear, but entities personifying natural forces, like the wind. This symbolic interpretation helped form Lilith's image as a figure tied to uncontrollable and enigmatic aspects of life. These spirits, including Lilith and the Lilith demons, were often associated with disease and misfortune. In Mesopotamian texts, demons like Lilith were accused of causing seizures, fevers, and other physical symptoms in people. In an era of primitive medical understanding, these spirits were blamed for conditions that science at the time could not explain. Thus, Lilith and the Lilith gained a reputation as malevolent spirits that victimized both men and women, reinforcing their role as bearers of ill health. This connection between spirituality and illness reflects a deep fear of human vulnerability. Records show that the demon Lilu was seen as a particular threat to women, while the Lilith targeted men. This specified behavior served as a way to organize fears and threats, dividing dangers according to the gender of the victims. The figure of the Lilith, therefore, symbolized aspects of sexuality and repressed desires, further consolidating Lilith as an entity that challenged social norms. This representation allowed society to project its fears onto a supernatural figure, giving Lilith the role of a defiant spirit. The view of Lilith as a female demon reinforced concepts of order and disorder within society. In cultures that valued stability and family continuity, demons who attacked people of the opposite sex were seen as genuine threats to social well-being. Lilith was therefore a personification of the forces of disorder that threatened family life and the natural cycle of reproduction. This helped the community justify the presence of rituals and amulets to maintain control over what could not be seen or predicted. She thus became a symbol of resistance to order. The names and etymology of Lilith and the Lilith demons reveal much about the Mesopotamian understanding of spirituality, death, and sexuality. Over time, these concepts were adapted and reinterpreted in various cultures, always keeping Lilith in an ambiguous role between good and evil. In Mesopotamia, Lilith was not merely a figure of fear but a symbol of natural forces and the uncertainty these forces brought. She embodied the unknown, which made her a timeless and unforgettable figure in the history of human thought. Mesopotamian medical texts reveal an intriguing perspective on how Lilith and other demons were seen as causes of diseases and physical disorders. These texts, written on clay tablets, show how Mesopotamian society used supernatural explanations for symptoms they could not comprehend. Conditions like seizures, bleeding, and fevers were attributed to the influence of spirits, with Lilith mentioned among them. This reflects a deep belief that physical health was intertwined with spiritual forces, revealing a holistic view of the human being. Descriptions of symptoms associated with Lilith were specific, with details that seemed to point to real diseases. For example, there were records of demons causing people to roll their eyes and bleed from the nose. Such symptoms were accompanied by recommendations for exorcisms and other purification rituals, reflecting a spiritual treatment for physical ailments. This approach shows how ancient medicine sought to understand and combat what they considered invisible malign influences. In this context, Lilith was not just a mythical figure but an active demon in daily life. The way these demons were categorized also reveals an attempt at imposing order on the chaos of human health. Demons like Lilith were described as entities that attacked people of the opposite sex, reinforcing the idea of a connection between gender and spiritual vulnerability. Thus, men were considered susceptible to Lilith attacks, while women were seen as victims of Lilu. This type of distinction helped society organize and understand the invisible dangers they believed surrounded their homes and bodies, creating a relationship between medicine, spirituality, and gender. In addition to physical symptoms, medical texts also described emotional and psychological states like mental confusion and despair. These descriptions suggest that demons like Lilith were also seen as causes of psychological disorders. It was believed that a sick or possessed spirit altered a person's perception and sanity, creating deep suffering. Lilith and the Lilith thus became supernatural explanations for the mysteries of the human mind. This concept integrated mental health and spirituality, reinforcing the view that the invisible world affected human life in a comprehensive way. The recommended treatments included amulets, enchantment bowls, and specific rituals to drive away demons like Lilith. These practices were performed by exorcists and priests who used carefully prepared incantations to ensure spiritual and physical health. These rituals, in addition to treating the body, brought peace to the mind and spirit, alleviating anxiety caused by fear of demons. The use of symbolic rituals to treat symptoms is a testament to how the medical knowledge of the time dealt with supernatural forces, seeking to restore order through faith. The presence of Lilith in Mesopotamian medical texts provides a rich insight into beliefs and the understanding of health in ancient times. Lilith and other demons were integral to medicine and healing, being considered causes of illnesses but also figures who could be controlled through rituals. This approach allowed people to feel protected, knowing they had means to deal with the invisible influences they believed hovered around their lives. Thus, these medical texts were not merely prescriptions but also sources of spiritual comfort. In Mesopotamia, demons like the Lilith were associated with young people who died before reaching adulthood, whether in terms of marriage or motherhood. These spirits were considered unsatisfied ghosts who wandered the earth in search of something they never attained in life. For this reason, Lilith were seen as restless spirits who especially haunted young men, luring and afflicting them with disease. This idea symbolizes a connection between interrupted youth and dissatisfaction, portraying a social fear of dying before fulfilling desired life roles. Furthermore, the Lilith were often associated with aspects of repressed sexuality and unfulfilled desires. These demons, especially the female ones, were seen as seductive creatures who disturbed the minds and bodies of men, drawing them into a state of vulnerability. This view connected the female demon to an idea of dangerous sexual energy, showing how society projected its fears and sexual anxieties onto spiritual figures. Lilith and her female counterparts were thus associated with mystery and temptation, reinforcing taboos and boundaries around female sexuality. These demons also represented deviated youth, a metaphor for the dangers of desires and impulses that did not fit social norms. Lilith, as the principal figure in this class of demons, represented the opposite of the traditional woman and was therefore seen as a threat. The image of Lilith as a sexual and challenging figure contributed to the construction of strict behavioral boundaries for women, demonstrating the impact of these myths on social structure. It was as if society used these tales to impose control over impulses deemed dangerous. The belief that female demons haunted men also reflects a social view of gender, where the feminine was seen as the bearer of seduction and danger. This fear was expressed in the form of stories about Lilith and Lilith, demons who sought to seduce and drain the vitality of men. Lilith, in this sense, became a personification of the danger of unchecked femininity. This demonized view of female sexuality reinforced the need to maintain control over women and their expressions of independence, with repercussions on issues of female power and freedom. To protect themselves from these influences, practices such as the use of amulets and enchantments were adopted, creating a layer of security against the charms of dangerous sexuality. These rituals were part of everyday life, especially for young people who believed their souls could be compromised by such spirits. The practice of protection reflected society's fear of the disorder these demons represented, a disorder that transcended the physical and affected the emotional and psychological. The existence of Lilith and the Lilith symbolized, therefore, a collective effort to maintain order. The figure of Lilith and the Lilith as seductive female spirits continued to evolve in later beliefs, becoming representations of independent and dangerous sexuality. Over time, Lilith came to represent not only the fear of uncontrollable sexuality but also a symbol of rebellion against social norms. This dual view of Lilith, as both a threat and a symbol of freedom, persists in various cultures and mythologies. Her story is a deep reflection of social tensions over gender, desire, and power that endure through time. The symbolic marriage to demons such as Lilith and the Lilith was a fascinating and unusual ritual used to appease these restless spirits. The practice involved creating small figurines representing the demon, whether male or female, and performing a marriage ceremony. The aim of this ritual was to offer the spirit the peace and satisfaction it sought, rather than leaving it wandering and disturbing the living. This act demonstrated how people tried to negotiate with invisible forces rather than simply battling them. This type of symbolic marriage reflected the belief that demons were seeking a life they had never experienced, a way to complete their existence. People believed that by performing this ritual, they were helping spirits find rest. The ceremonies involved not only words but also specific objects and gestures that ensured the union between the demons. This symbolic marriage served as a socially comprehensible solution to a spiritual problem, bringing the invisible closer and making it more understandable. These marriage ceremonies included figures of both male and female demons, sometimes called male and female Lilith. The idea was to create a new spiritual relationship that would divert the spirit's attention away from human victims. The marriage ritual is intriguing because it shows how Mesopotamian society dealt with the concept of desire and fulfillment for the souls of the dead. It was a form of pacification and respect for the unknown, where the demon was not destroyed but satisfied. This marriage symbolism highlights an approach of harmony rather than repression. The ritual also involved a symbolic transfer process, where the problems or threats caused by these spirits were redirected to other objects or figures. This form of spiritual deception was a way of protecting people without directly confronting the spirit. The figures represented a sort of peace pact with invisible forces. This solution demonstrated the ingenuity with which ancient cultures handled fear, using symbolism to establish a controlled, protective relationship with the spiritual world. These rituals were performed by priests or ritual specialists who knew how to deal with demons safely and effectively. The marriage ceremony was accompanied by specific incantations that reinforced the spirit's commitment to leave the victim in peace. These specialists were deeply respected in society, as they had the knowledge required to perform such rituals. The importance of the ritual reflected the value placed on balance and harmony, even in relation to threatening forces. The symbolic marriage to demons represents a unique facet of Mesopotamian spirituality, where even evil was treated with a certain degree of respect and balance. Lilith, as a figure of desire and dissatisfaction, found a kind of solution in this ritual. The ceremony shows how the desire for peace and protection influenced the spiritual practices of the time, allowing people to live with less fear of invisible forces. This ritual expresses a culture that preferred to pacify evil rather than destroy it, reinforcing the idea that understanding and negotiation were preferable to direct confrontation. The Berni relief is a fascinating artifact from ancient Babylon, dating to approximately 1800 BCE, and is famous for its image of a winged, clawed female figure. For many years, scholars believed this figure represented Lilith, associating her characteristics with this mythical entity. The posture, wings, and mysterious demeanor of the figure on the relief reinforced this connection, leading Lilith to be recognized as a visual icon even outside the Jewish context. However, recent studies have shown that this interpretation is, in fact, mistaken. Today, most researchers believe the Berni relief depicts a goddess, probably Ishtar or Ereshkigal, prominent figures in Mesopotamian mythology. Both are divinities associated with death, war, and fertility, characteristics that initially misled scholars attempting to identify them as Lilith. This confusion illustrates how images of powerful female figures tended to be interpreted negatively, projecting onto Lilith traits that belong to other deities. The connection between the relief and Lilith shows how myths and interpretations surrounding her have evolved. This mistaken interpretation reinforces an ancient tendency to associate the feminine with symbols of mystery and danger. Lilith, often viewed as a nocturnal and independent spirit, was linked to the Berni figure because of her dark appearance and physical attributes. This error ultimately reinforced Lilith's image as a threat to social order, a sensual and dangerous figure. The relief was thus interpreted as a visual representation of female rebellion and independence, traits that align with Lilith's image but actually have a more complex and varied origin. The fact that Lilith was associated with a goddess demonstrates how concepts of femininity and power were intertwined in antiquity. Ishtar and Ereshkigal were central figures in Mesopotamian mythology, representing both life and death, fertility and destruction. The confusion of Lilith with these goddesses reflects an ancient view in which women who defied norms were regarded with suspicion. Lilith, even without being a goddess, became a symbol of uncontrolled forces, reinforcing an age-old stereotype of femininity and danger. With advances in archaeological studies, the true identity of the Berni relief figure was clarified, offering a more accurate understanding of female representations and beliefs in Babylon. Nonetheless, the myth of Lilith's association with the relief persists in popular culture, where she is seen as a goddess of chaos and seduction. This image perpetuates the tradition of viewing Lilith as a complex presence, blending elements of power, seduction, and danger. Even though the relief does not depict Lilith, it helped consolidate her image as a multifaceted figure. This confusion between Lilith and the Berni relief illustrates how Lilith's figure has been shaped and reinterpreted over the centuries. From an entity associated with nocturnal demons, she was elevated to a goddess, representing the darker side of femininity. Today, Lilith remains an inspiring but also feared figure, demonstrating how narratives and iconography can transform and adapt myths to the cultural needs of each era. This myth, though corrected, remains a symbol of her enduring and enigmatic presence in history. The figure of Lilith appears briefly in the Hebrew Bible, specifically in Isaiah 34, where her name arises in a prophecy about the desolation of the kingdom of Edom. The text describes an apocalyptic setting where wild animals and demonic creatures take over the devastated land. In this context, Lilith is mentioned as an entity that finds rest among the ruins, reinforcing her image as a desert spirit. This verse has become a central reference for understanding Lilith in Judaism, though her meaning is debated among scholars. Bible translations vary considerably regarding the word Lilith, reflecting uncertainty about the identity of the figure mentioned. Some versions translate the term as night creature or owl, while others opt for desert demon or even ghost. This variation in translations points to ambiguity regarding Lilith's true role in the biblical text, illustrating the challenge of interpreting such an ancient and multifaceted figure. The different versions illustrate how Lilith can be seen as both a literal spirit and a symbol of isolation and desolation. The association of Lilith with the desert is essential to understanding her image as a solitary and dangerous spirit. In Jewish tradition, the desert was seen as a place of trials and the presence of evil spirits, representing a distance from God and divine protection. Lilith, in this context, is a figure who inhabits the unknown, far from order and life. This association with the desert reinforces her character of independence and transgressive nature, contrasting with domestic life and family protection, creating a figure that lives on society's margins. This interpretation is reinforced by the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Septuagint, where Lilith is identified as a centaur, a mythical figure of Greek origin. In the Latin translation, the Vulgate, Lilith is rendered as Lamia, a Greco-Roman mythological figure known for attacking children. These translations reflect a tendency to see Lilith through the lens of local mythologies, shaping her figure according to different cultural traditions. Lilith's transformation into a frightening entity fits well within each context, where she is viewed as a threatening and dark demon. In Jewish tradition, Lilith is often interpreted as a type of demon or supernatural creature rather than a specific entity. This perspective suggests that Lilith may have represented a class of beings, similar to the Mesopotamian Lilitu. The pluralistic nature of her image in the Bible implies that she embodied both a concrete danger and a metaphor for chaos and fear. Lilith, alongside other demonic desert creatures, represents forces that threaten divine order, making her a powerful and unsettling symbol. Over time, this single reference to Lilith in the Bible has generated a vast body of interpretations and legends. Each translation and interpretation added a new element to the mystery of her figure, expanding her role in accordance with the beliefs and fears of each era. Lilith became an entity symbolizing the hidden side of spirituality, a spirit dwelling on the boundaries of the known. Her brief but powerful presence in the biblical text reflects the lasting impact figures like her have on the collective imagination, challenging the boundaries between the sacred and the profane. The Dead Sea Scrolls offer an intriguing glimpse of Lilith as a spiritual and demonic figure. Among these documents, there is a mention of Lilith in an exorcism text, which invokes divine protection against a series of spirits, including Lilith and other destructive entities. These scrolls, dating from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE, reveal how Lilith was feared as a supernatural threat. Her inclusion alongside demons and dangerous spirits reinforces the idea that she represented a kind of evil that needed to be exorcised. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, Lilith is mentioned as a singular figure but is also treated as a category of demons, suggesting that her name might refer to more than one spirit. This duality points to an ambiguous understanding of Lilith, where she is both a specific character and a group of demonic entities. This view broadens her presence in Jewish traditions and shows that she was regarded as a concrete threat, requiring specific practices of exorcism and protection. The reference to Lilith in this context demonstrates her influence on ancient religious practices. Beyond the exorcism texts, Lilith is mentioned in other hymns and prayers, where she appears in lists of spirits and demons that cause disorder and suffering. The association of Lilith with these dangerous figures reflects a popular belief that she was responsible for illness, misfortune, and even death. These texts reveal a dualistic view in which Lilith represents a force opposed to divine order and protection, requiring specific rituals and invocations to drive her away. In this way, the manuscripts demonstrate a spirituality deeply concerned with balance and protection against negative forces. The use of Lilith in exorcism rituals underscores the importance of keeping her away from Jewish communities and homes. Such texts were used to ensure that the presence of demonic spirits, including Lilith, would not affect family life. These protective practices indicate a profound belief in the power of sacred words and rituals to keep such spirits at bay. The exorcism rituals reinforce the idea that society needed spiritual protection against forces beyond human control, especially demons like Lilith, which represented concrete dangers. Lilith's presence in the Dead Sea Scrolls also suggests that she was already a well-established and feared figure among Jews of that time. Despite her origins in Mesopotamian myths, she was adapted and incorporated into Jewish demonology, assuming a specific role in the religious imagination. This transition illustrates Lilith's adaptability to different contexts and cultures, solidifying her presence as a figure of authority and terror. Her inclusion in the Dead Sea Scrolls serves as evidence of her significance in the construction of spiritual defense rituals. The Dead Sea Scrolls provide one of the earliest mentions of Lilith in Jewish tradition, showing her evolution as a supernatural threat that required caution. She is seen as an evil entity, but, at the same time, a figure with a specific role in the cosmology of the time. Her continued presence in these texts reinforces the complexity of her image, mixing fear, respect, and a continuous need for spiritual protection. In this context, Lilith emerges not only as a demonic entity but as a force that continues to fascinate and challenge conceptions of good and evil. The Mesopotamian enchantment bowls offer fascinating insight into how ancient communities, especially Jewish ones, protected their homes against evil. Dating from the 6th to 8th century CE, these bowls were inscribed with enchantments designed to ward off demons and malevolent spirits, like Lilith. Lilith's presence in these inscriptions demonstrates her importance as a recognized and feared threat. These objects reflected the anxieties of the time and the belief that certain rituals could repel negative influences. Lilith, as one of the targets of these rituals, was a prominent figure in spiritual protection practices. These bowls contained not only enchantments but also powerful invocations of sacred figures to protect families. The language used was carefully chosen to intimidate and repel Lilith's spirit, which was considered a threat to the health and peace of the home. In many cases, the enchantments referenced divine or holy figures for protection against Lilith and other demons. This combination of words and sacred names made the bowl symbols of security, channeling the beliefs and fears of their users. Lilith was mentioned as an entity to be avoided, and the bowl functioned as a barrier against her actions. Many of these enchantments also included symbolic divorce documents, in which practitioners formally declared separation from Lilith, in both her male and female forms. This divorce document is particularly intriguing as it acknowledged Lilith as an unwanted presence to be formally expelled from the home. Declarations such as, "This is the divorce from Lilith," reveal the careful approach to these practices, recognizing Lilith as a threatening entity but one that could be controlled and expelled. The concept of divorce symbolized a definitive severing, creating essential spiritual distance for safety. The enchantment bowls were often buried in strategic locations within homes, such as corners or doorways, to form a protective circle. The practice of hiding these bowls reinforced the idea of an invisible barrier against Lilith and other spirits. This ritual of protective burial was common in Babylonian Jewish culture and in other communities that used enchantment bowls. The specific locations where the bowls were buried reflected the desire to create a safe environment, impenetrable by Lilith and her influences. This practice shows how society used symbolism to ward off unwanted energies. The choice of Judeo-Aramaic for writing the enchantments on the bowls shows the intersection of culture and spirituality in Mesopotamia. Aramaic was widely understood, making the enchantments accessible to various communities. This reflects the care taken to make spiritual knowledge available to all, especially when dealing with threatening forces like Lilith. The use of a common language strengthened confidence in the ritual's power, reinforcing the sense of protection against demons. Lilith, as an ever-present entity, was a primary reason for the use of these protective measures. The enchantment bowls reveal the complexity of spiritual practices of the time, showing how Mesopotamian communities interpreted and faced spiritual threats. Lilith, viewed as a dangerous demon, was a primary target of these practices, and her expulsion symbolized the restoration of peace and order in the home. The use of bowls as spiritual barriers illustrates the power these objects represented and the trust that practitioners placed in them. For many, Lilith was a presence that could be contained through these artifacts, allowing families to live with greater peace of mind. The narrative of Lilith as Adam's first wife emerges in the alphabet of Ben Sira, an anonymous Jewish text dating between the 8th and 10th centuries CE. This is the first known text to expand the story of the Garden of Eden by introducing Lilith as a companion created from the same dust as Adam. The story reveals that Lilith refuses to submit to Adam, believing they are equals, leading to conflict and her eventual departure from paradise. This myth solidifies Lilith as a figure of independence and rebellion within Jewish tradition. After leaving Eden, Lilith goes to the Red Sea, where she joins other demons and bears hundreds of children. This transformation of Lilith into a demonic figure reinforces her image as a societal threat, particularly to pregnant women and children. In the myth, she is pursued by 3 angels who ask her to return to Adam, but Lilith refuses, even under the threat of death. This part of the narrative presents Lilith as a powerful entity who defied the authority of both Adam and God, creating an intriguing duality where she is seen as both malevolent and courageous. The alphabet of Ben Sira also mentions that Lilith makes a pact with the angels, promising not to harm babies who wear an amulet with the angels' names. This agreement symbolizes a kind of truce between Lilith and society, showing that, although she is seen as a threat, she can be warded off through spiritual protections. This detail contributes to the tradition of amulets and protective rituals against Lilith, especially for pregnant women. These amulets continue to be used as a form of protection, reflecting Lilith's enduring impact on Jewish culture. Lilith's refusal to submit to Adam also symbolizes a rejection of traditional gender roles, making her figure a representation of female autonomy. This characteristic has made her popular in certain modern circles, where she is viewed as a symbol of resistance against patriarchy. In the alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith is portrayed as an anti-mother who kills human babies while bearing demons, reinforcing cultural fears surrounding women who defied social norms. Lilith's image as a subversive figure was consolidated during this period. The myth of Lilith as Adam's first wife also helps explain a discrepancy in the 2 creation narratives found in Genesis. While the first chapter describes the simultaneous creation of man and woman, the second depicts the creation of Eve from Adam's rib. Some scholars suggest that this difference indicates 2 different wives: Lilith, created as Adam's equal, and Eve, made from a part of his body. Although this interpretation is not found in the Bible, the myth of Lilith provides a symbolic explanation for these variations in the sacred text. This story of Lilith as Adam's first wife greatly influenced Jewish tradition and generated a unique view of the feminine figure. She came to be seen as a symbol of the wild feminine, an entity that, while demonic, represents freedom and independence. This myth solidified her presence in both popular and religious culture as a figure that transcends boundaries and challenges submission. Through the alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith became an archetype of resistance, and her story continues to prompt discussion about equality and the role of women in society. Lilith's image underwent a significant transformation in the 20th century, where she was reinterpreted as an icon of female resistance and empowerment. During the second wave of feminism, Lilith was reclaimed from the religious imagination and transformed into a symbol of freedom and independence. Her story of refusal to submit to Adam and exile from paradise came to be seen as acts of courage and autonomy. This reinterpretation made Lilith an inspiring figure for women seeking equality and freedom of expression, particularly in Jewish communities. In 1976, the Jewish feminist magazine Lilith was launched, aimed at giving voice to women within Jewish tradition. The magazine's name reflects a desire to reframe Lilith, transforming her from a demonic figure into a symbol of resistance against oppressive norms. The magazine addressed themes of female empowerment and the challenges women faced, especially within cultural and religious contexts. The choice of Lilith as the icon for this movement marked a turning point in her perception, positioning her as a pioneer in the fight against patriarchy. Lilith, once a figure associated with evil and disorder, was reinterpreted as a woman who, by refusing submission, claimed her own space. This reinterpretation is a modern response to the tradition of vilifying independent and subversive women. Thus, Lilith came to symbolize not only rebellion but also dignity and self-confidence. This new significance, which transforms her into a feminist icon, highlights how the figure of Lilith adapts to different contexts and social demands. She has become a sort of heroine for women seeking autonomy. Lilith's transformation into a feminist symbol transcended the Jewish audience and reached various modern cultures and communities. Today, she is a popular figure not only among feminists but also among pagan and neo-pagan groups who see in her a symbol of power and freedom. Lilith is often associated with the figure of a witch, a powerful, free woman who challenges established norms. This new representation of Lilith reflects a cultural shift in how female power is viewed and valued, celebrating her as a positive force. The growing popularity of the name Lilith as a baby name also reflects this cultural shift. Since the early 2010s, the name Lilith has risen in popularity for girls, especially in the United States and European countries. This phenomenon indicates how much Lilith's image has been reframed, transforming a feared figure into a positive symbol. Parents who choose the name Lilith for their daughters often associate it with independence and feminine strength, showing how the myth has evolved. Today, Lilith represents a figure that transcends good and evil, challenging and inspiring. Her journey of transformation, from demon to feminist icon, is a testament to how myths and stories adapt to cultural and social needs. For many modern women, Lilith embodies the ongoing struggle for equality and respect, a figure who embodies the courage to follow one's path. In her long journey, Lilith has moved from the shadows of fear to become a symbol of resilience and power, proving that the past can be redefined in new and meaningful ways.